Okay, and I'm going to start by introducing our speaker, Kimberly Leaman. She has graciously joined us to do this webinar today while she's on vacation. So it was very kind of her to do this, and I'm really looking forward to it. Kim Leaman is a library IT project manager who focuses primarily on Princeton University Library's digital projects and initiatives. She collaborates with staff members from various departments to meet the needs and manage the expectations of Princeton's internal and external stakeholders. Kim is also a product owner for Princeton University Library's digital repository and curated collections platform, Digital PUL. Okay, and with that, we'll turn it over to Kimberly for her presentation, then we'll have a question and answer afterwards. So people can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll read from that at the end.
Great.
Take it away.
Thank you so much, Marissa. I'm really excited to be here speaking with all of you, and thank you for the introduction. So good afternoon. As Marissa said, my name is Kim Leaman, and I am an IT project manager at Princeton University Library, or PUL. I focus primarily on our digital projects and initiatives and help supervise all aspects of our digital project implementation. This includes working with key stakeholders, developing digital projects, which I'm sure many of us on this call already know about, and coordinating with our administration and partners in other departments, such as the Digital Studio, Conservation, Microforms, Cataloging and Metadata Services, and of course, Special Collections. So that's my job title, and it takes up roughly 50% of my work life, and I love it. I mean, on most days, I love it. However, I'm also a certified product owner and Scrum certified product owner, actually. And I assumed the role of product owner with a couple of our library's agile software development teams to help prioritize and deliver the amazing things our users and stakeholders want or need to use and work with in our applications at PUL. Today, I've been asked to share a bit about my role as a product owner, what it is, why I think it's important, and how we are introducing, implementing, and beginning to create a larger agile community of practice here at PUL. So before we jump in, we should probably very briefly touch on the definition of agile methodology in software development, so we're all on the same page. As I mentioned, I'm a product owner who works with software development teams who all practice some flavor of agile. But what does that mean? At its core, the agile methodology is a project management approach that involves breaking the project into phases and emphasizes continuous collaboration and improvement. Teams follow cycles of planning, executing, and evaluating. And a good product owner is an important part of the development process. They're passionate people who are skilled at being great communicators, collaborators, or navigators through cultural and political realities of the institution. I also thought it would be helpful to share the manifesto for Agile software development. Now, I'm not going to bore you with the full history of its creation back in 2021 at a ski resort in Utah, but I'm happy to provide the link here for those who are curious to go down that rabbit hole for themselves. The manifesto states, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan. That is, while there's value in the items on the right, we value the items in the left in bold more. And they go on to list the 12 principles behind the Agile Manifesto that I also invite you to explore at this link here if you're interested. All right, moving on. The product owner role, and you'll notice I refer to product ownership as a role, not a job title, is typically handled by one person. And our primary goal is to help steward our institution's resources to ensure we maximize the value that a product is generating. So that's easy, right? It's just one thing. How hard can it be? In other words, as a product owner, I'm accountable for ensuring the most value possible is being delivered to our users. I'm responsible for ensuring I work hard to gain the trust of and build alignment within our stakeholders in an effort to learn and understand what value really means to them. So like what is value to them? We need to define it together, and I need to be able to communicate that value to developer teams and manage expectation within both groups. I am responsible for working hard to help prioritize the work and protect the focus of our amazing developer teams so that together we can successfully deliver that value. It's also important to remember that our developers are creative and passionate people too. They're going to want to understand the why and for whom and the impact of the thing we are doing too. So, for example, say I have a new feature idea thanks to a lot of user feedback for our digital repository. So I am currently a product owner for our digital repository known as Figgy here at PUL. I am not expected to know the nitty-gritty particulars of what this new feature is and how exactly it's going to work in our repository. I'm not a subject expert. That's not why I've been put in the position of product owner for this application. What I do know is that it's a great idea, and I believe it will really help people work better in our repository. Now, I cannot stress this enough. I sincerely believe that I am making a positive impact on the way someone works or interacts with our digitized content within our application. I'm excited about this idea because I know it will help and that it fits into our team vision and what we call our North Star statements on an institutional level. I've taken the time to actively listen and learn the value and how it fits into that vision by talking with our stakeholders about this new idea. The want or need has to be well understood by me and the development team, in this case, the Digital Library Services team, who I'm lucky enough to work with, who will be responsible for building the right thing to deliver the identified value to our users. So at minimum, I need to be able to answer three things. Number one, why we should be building this new exciting thing. Two, what the problem is this thing is going to solve. And three, who is it for? Who are we building it for, right? Now, this is not a one-time conversation on either side. Agile is an iterative process focusing on continuous collaboration and improvement, right? So value check feedback, value check feedback. Ongoing conversations and learning with your dev team, stakeholders, administrative members of your institution is essential, and I would argue is one of the most important pieces of Agile software development. Also, always remember your stakeholders, they are an essential part of your team throughout this process too. So a challenge you might have identified already, this iterative process of communication and feedback can and usually does lead to a lot of new ideas from stakeholders about this great new thing you're building. As a product owner, it is also my responsibility to find ways to say no or not right now to some or frankly a lot of these new ideas. This helps prioritize the highest value ideas that I've gotten buy-in or stakeholder alignment on while helping minimize something called the product backlog. In their podcast, What Makes a Great Product Owner with Lance Stacy, Brian Milner argues that the Agile principle, simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential, is the job of a product owner. It is imperative for us to understand and focus on what is the most valuable and reserve the precious and limited capacity of our developer teams to only be used on those high value things. But how do we do that? We as product owners remain super vigilant on the product backlog. If we own anything, we own this. A product backlog should be, according to our dear friends at Atlassian, a prioritized list of work for the development team that is derived from the product roadmap. So an action plan for how a product will evolve over time and its requirements. The most important items are shown at the top of the product backlog, so the team knows what to deliver first. The development team does not work through the backlog at the product owner's pace, and the product owner isn't pushing work to the development team. Instead, the development team pulls work so the backlog as there is from the backlog as there's capacity for it, either continually. So for example, the team I work with uses something called a Kanban board to help visualize their work and push it through a pipeline, or by iteration. Now I want to pause here to clarify the prioritized list of work mentioned in this particular definition. If I am piling a ton of work through the product backlog, prioritized or not, to the point where our developers are so overwhelmed and exhausted with a giant to-do list, our hardworking and caring dev team will never feel like they have the opportunity to innovate or learn, which leads to frustration and burnout. So it's my responsibility to work effectively with our stakeholders to at least get alignment on the high priority things to do and to add to that list and add that list to the product backlog. I need to be constantly communicating with these stakeholders and the developer team to manage expectations so that I can support and empower both groups to create the amazing new features that will then create value in our products together. So are all product owner roles the same? Short answer from my own personal observation, no, they aren't. Of course, there are exceptions and other expectations and processes of product owners on teams. And those expectations and processes can and do vary depending on institutions, the culture within that institution or your department, stakeholders, and indeed on the teams they work with, even within our own library here at Princeton. Having said that, I do believe a key strength for all product owners at my institution will be having a shared foundational understanding of Scrum-based product development and product owner skills from a common source. This is important when thinking about the needs, bandwidths, flexibility, and adaptability of our work on an institutional scale. I also believe this foundational knowledge will better help more of us at PUL understand and play a more active role in building sustainable programs in alignment with our own Agile North Star statements. Statement number 1 in particular that I highlighted here. So, who are product owners? As I mentioned before, I, along with others, see product owner as a role, not a job title. Many different job titles may also have the role of a product owner for their institution. My job title is IT project manager, and I also happen to have a percentage of my time allocated to the role of product owner for our digital repository and curated collections platform. Official job titles are pretty irrelevant as long as folks feel that they have the right person to fill the product owner role for that particular project. So some questions to ask ourselves might be, would this person have conflicting interests if put in the role of product owner for an application? Do they have the authority to successfully carry out the role? And again, does this person have the right knowledge? And by knowledge, I don't mean the in-depth knowledge for how a product works, like a subject specialist, but knowledge of the opportunities for that project. How about the energy and the passion to inspire others? Do they have that? And here's a big one. Do they have the time to be fully invested in this role? Will they be available whenever the team needs help answering questions, both quickly and efficiently? Now, regarding the time and availability question, it's important, if not critical, for our supervisors and administrators to understand and appreciate the work required of product owners during work cycles, as they are the connections between many facets of a project or product development. In short, this is not an expectation in addition to the work a colleague may already be responsible for, but a conversation with and support of their supervisor about percentages of time allocated to that work. So I'll just use myself as an example. As a product owner within the Digital Library Services team, or DLS, it's my responsibility to maintain a list of highest priority issues from our stakeholders, participate during any and all relevant work cycles by attending daily stand-ups and planning meetings, remain easy to contact on Slack and Zoom, and of course to bring DLS developers when discussing new features or potential changes to an existing system with our stakeholders. I need to find sustainable ways for us to get a lot of people from all echelons of our institution on board for a larger idea, especially when working at scale. Being able to navigate the politics and culture of our institution and influence while effectively communicating and supporting our vision takes time and is incredibly important as well. Now, I know these particulars of my role with DLS because, well, for one, they are a really collaborative, kind, and helpful team to begin with, but also because they made me an active thought partner when it came to writing out the roles and responsibilities of product owners for their already well-established team handbook. I also have the full support of my supervisor to serve in this role to the best of my ability, and he worked with me to ensure an appropriate percentage of my time would be allocated to fulfilling this role. A noted major challenge at many institutions for product owners, or indeed agile software development as a whole, is creating and sustaining that continuous decision-making loop. The ability to quickly and continuously acquire and act on feedback is difficult, in many cases because the concept of agile is not a part of the culture within the institution at large. And it will be difficult to effectively implement the process without inspiring and nurturing a community of practice and cultural change at the institutional level. But challenges like these inspire new ideas and opportunities. We have proposed that it is important that we at PUL find a way to organize and develop a shared foundational understanding of Scrum-based product development and product owner skills from a common source. Speaking personally, I've tried to connect colleagues, help create documentation, and support the concept of communities of practice to stakeholders for a variety of reasons. These partnerships are invaluable to me as a product owner for our applications. The combined voices of our stakeholders and their group's feedback continuously help us prioritize tickets for feature enhancements in our applications. Similarly, workflows and coordination of staff that share foundational Scrum-based product owner tools and knowledge strengthen the ways in which we collaborate, prioritize, and organize the work being done. PUL's applications may depend on our users to drive the continuous improvements we make as a team. However, the organization and sustainability of the ways in which that work gets done is dependent on how we create and implement workflows and identify priorities as an institution. In answer to these needs expressed from multiple voices within many departments, including our catalog and metadata services department, operations, many developer teams, the digital studio, and so on, we have successfully completed our first virtual Scrum-based product owner training and certification for a targeted cohort of library staff through Scrum Alliance. Members of the first cohort comprise the entire Discovery and Access Services team, including the supervisor of that team, 2 identified product owners from Collections and Access Services, and 2 early career fellows from the Digital Library Services team and Cataloging and Metadata Services. It is my belief that in order to have greater positive impact, departmental buy-in, and success, teams and the supervisors learn together and workshop ways in which the training might help inform their future work or needs as a team. After conversations with the Assistant Director of Operations and Desktop Support and my supervisor, Esme Cowles, who is awesome, we have identified and proposed a second cohort of 14 people for Product Owner and Scrum Master training and certification that includes colleagues from IT Operations, Desktop Support, and Early Career Fellows for fiscal year 2025. Now, this is great, but we kind of need to be looking ahead if we're thinking about sustainability. So while I'm heartened to know that we have a good chance of approval for this second cohort, a colleague of mine and I came together to propose something new, a short-term investment that opens up possibilities for a more long-term, financially sustainable benefit to our institution. In an effort to continue building and expanding this community of practice and inspire cultural change sustainably at PUL, Senior Software Engineer Beth Sadler and I have also been approved for a week-long Agile coaching boot camp to attain 2 certifications. One is the Certified Professional Agile Team Facilitation, and the other is Certified Professional Agile Coaching. And the journey continues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Okay, do we have any questions for Kim? Just wait a second while people think about it. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope it was. I care a bit about it.
Yeah. Okay, do we have any questions or people thinking about it? There we go. Thank you so much, Ellen. Okay, can you talk about how this idea all started and how you built buy-in or course corrected?
Sure, sure. And I want to make sure I understand the question, so please let me know if I'm wrong. I understand you asking about the buy-in for product owner training on a more institutional level. Is that correct?
Yes, and also just course correcting because I think Agile has been around for a while, and so some folks have different understandings or ability to stay in line with what it's actually intended to be about.
Sure, sure. So this was very much a grassroots effort. It's something that I care a great deal about. And uh, this is when communication really comes into play as a product owner. You're talking with people all the time. And I happen to be talking with folks on another developer team saying, gosh, it would be great if we actually had a product owner for this because we don't have enough contact with, person A, stakeholders. We're not really sure what we should be building. And that conversation grew. I am already a product owner for DLS. They have a set of product owners for their products, so it's pretty well established on that team. I started talking with other groups. I became a part of another developer team just to see how they were growing in different ways, and talked with my supervisor, Esme, and said, you know what, I think that there's a need here. Was it my idea? No, I would say that it was the idea of several people that I happened to put on a piece of paper as a proposal. So getting buy-in was really just talking about it, talking about my experience with the dev team that I work with. When I'm meeting with stakeholders, telling them about how the developers are working on their tickets, making them a part of that process, showing them the GitHub ticket, explaining why we're prioritizing it a certain way. Is it a sudden priority? Why? So getting buy-in was talking a lot and then writing a proposal, getting full support from my supervisor. We're really lucky that the head of our group is also very interested in agile software development. I also think having agile North Star statements was a really good argument for me to get buy-in even further, saying you list agile. We will be agile as one of the North Star statements of our institution. I would bet you 95% of the people don't understand what that means.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. And so that's what it started out as, a conversation that built into a larger conversation, brought in different people from the library, and we got approved for a pilot for a nominal fee, a targeted cohort. Uh, we're getting feedback. We're presenting the feedback to library administration. And currently we have our second proposal in waiting for approval. But I'm heartened because both Bess and I were approved immediately for being sent to this Agile coaching certification. So when you feel like people are interested, it's time to try and foster that. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It's very helpful as far as being specific, especially with the course correction and understanding what it is actually about.
Yeah, and teams are going to be different. Teams are going to choose different flavors of agile. And I think, my person who I learned from, I loved that he said, we're putting a brain on agile. Agile, you can talk about Scrum, you can talk about Kanban, you can talk about the tools. Unless you put a brain on it, it's just another process for doing things. Working smart and learning continuously from your experience is a really great way to move forward.
Okay, we've got some other questions. Okay, Dave asked, I'm curious about how you have been able to advocate for Agile across the library, where many departments or members of leadership have a very different understanding of product and project management, i.e. traditional or waterfall. What methods have been successful in evangelizing for Agile and what were some pain points?
Sure. I would say a main pain point is the fact that work wasn't getting done in the ways that, like, I know that our teams can build things right. They're amazing developers. Building the right thing, especially now, is a highly iterative process. Things are changing so often. Unless you're getting constant feedback on what you should be building, um, you're going to be left lacking some information that may be really important. For me and my particular department, so I'm in IT, it was easy to talk about and get buy-in for my department. And one of the concerns, particularly from one of my colleagues, he's great. He said, unless it's adopted outside of IT, we're going to be missing that component because our stakeholders are out there too. They need to understand that we're going to need continuous feedback from them. So it's a slow process. We use Slack. For me, I'm a project manager. I think that was a real help. So when I identify a group of individuals working on a specific thing in our digital repository, so let's say ephemera, metadata, et cetera, that was my first community of practice that I really tried to get together. I brought them together, not just as individuals working in our repository, but an ephemera group that could talk to one another, and we could prioritize what they want together, and they could see how we're working with developer teams, and they know the developers' names. So it's kind of a slow process, but working it into the daily work that they are already doing with you to begin with was a really great first step.
Okay, and we've got a question from Stephen in the Q&A. How large or complex or important should a product be before it benefits from formal product ownership? When does it become too small, if at all, to not rise to the need of a PO, product
I mean,
ownership?
that's a good question. I would argue that a product owner, and this is when it becomes important, your role as a product owner should be well defined by the teams that you are working with. As I mentioned before, I worked on my role with the developer team I was working with in that portfolio. What is my job? What are my tasks? And those are for specific work cycles. I'm always gathering information and working with our stakeholders or working with our users on how they're using our applications. This is what gives me ideas and what makes a vision for, wow, I'm hearing this all the time. This is a feature we should be building. So depending on how you work and how often you work on your applications, I would say for me, I'm really glad that I'm a product owner for our digital repository, for example. I'm thinking or working with people on that weekly, even if we're not doing this massive sprint for doing something entirely new, a great new feature. Large or small, I'm a part of the sudden priority tickets if something is completely broken, because that helps me understand the application even more. And again, this is just my own personal experience. I'm a product owner on things that are not an enormous build, right? I can be a product owner for helping to prioritize those tickets and reach out to our stakeholders if it's a sudden priority for something that is needed for a high priority X.
Okay, thank you. Sadie asks, do you have any suggestions for product owners working within an institution with multiple repositories, each with their own product owners, especially if the repository shares some people resources, but not all?
Sure. So I can just talk from my own experience. We have not a lot, we have several product owners. So I'll just work with the digital library services team to give one example. I'm a product owner for our digital repository. We have two product owners for Pulfolite, so our finding aid site. And when work cycles come about, they're in the meetings, usually cycle start, cycle stop. Our work overlaps. And this is when you're learning, right? Like, when is it worth my coming in to see how we can do things? We work really well together. And this is something that Trey Pendragon was talking about, is as long as we're sharing the same vision, having more than one product owner on your team is going to be fine. So, I'm a product owner for Figgy. Two other people are product owners for Pulfolite for a very specific reason. We have a new product owner for our Maps portal. And, they're there for the work cycle sprints for those particular applications. But because the repository is used throughout all of them, I'm more or less in the dailies all the time. Does that answer your question? Have a share.
Hi, sorry. That mostly answers my question. I think my follow-up would be, how do you establish that shared vision, or like politically or organizationally, what work has been in place to establish that shared vision so you can work together that way?
I think it comes down to trust in your teams and trust in the people that you work with. The digital library services team is led by a person by the name of Trey Pendragon. He wanted to establish a vision for our digital library. And it was everybody coming together to talk about it. He has established a group of his product owners to talk about, what is the highest value? We did a little matrix. So I think if your institution is trusting your teams to kind of self-organize and talk about what's important to them, we're transparent, we're sharing out this information. We have a list of IT priorities that are given all the way up to the director, so they know what can be worked on, what we're focusing on to ensure that it's in alignment with what their needs are. But I think, establishing a trust that you have the right people in the positions to make good decisions, and transparency and communication.
Okay, next question. Ellen asks, can you also share more ways you've said no and how you've come to the conclusions that was the best way to go about saying no to that stakeholder? I'm trying to learn more about navigating politics, but it doesn't come naturally to me, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard, right? And I think many of us as project managers have to say no a lot too. I think the first thing to really think about is you're not alone, right? You're not saying no because you don't think it's a good idea. Talk with your team and talk with your stakeholders. Like if someone says, oh, wow, you know what, if only this button could be blue and with red subtext, have a conversation. Why is that important to you? How is this a priority? Is it, and then talk about, I'll give an example. As a project manager and trying to figure out how to prioritize work that is a huge priority for a particular person in special collections. I had a talk with the then with the deputy of special collections, and I said, I hear them. I understand that this is a huge need. Is it more important than your finding aid sprint, one of our primary portals of discovery? And that's when the conversation changed, right? So it's not me saying, nope, we're not going to do it. It's if you want this done, we would have to take something off the table. Is that high priority item more important to you and your users than this one? Not saying we're never going to do it, but just not right now. So I think having conversations to help understand how big of a priority or how high that value is the first step. And I have to say, you're not going to please everyone. It's okay. Your goal is getting alignment where they at least understand where you're coming from. So I've had great successes. I've learned a lot from my great failures. And I'm lucky I can go to my supervisor and say, look, this just happened. I need some feed forward here. In the future, what would you recommend I do? So I would say be bold, fail forward, ask for feedback, and look for your allies.
Okay, and I think the
Thank you.
last question, oh, sorry, is from Jessica. How do you handle testing for enhancements and bug fixes or software updates? Is it handled by the devs, the product owner, the stakeholders, a combo? We find a disconnect sometimes between the developers who are coding or updating and the domain knowledge required for some types of software in order to thoroughly test updates or enhancements.
Sure. So yes, we have tests in DLS. So with our products, there's product owners for your product, and we also have individuals called tech liaisons or tech leads for each application. So Trey Pendragon is the tech liaison for Figgy. Elliot Jordan is the tech liaison for the Maps portal. Anna Headley is the tech liaison for our instance of Spotlight, our curated collections platform. And so it's not to say that's the do all end all and that's where they have their highest specialization, but that's the first point of contact. If I have a question, I usually go to that person first or ping the channel. For bug fixes, so we do 3-week cycles where one is maintenance and research and the other 2 is for the actual cycle, because a maintenance burden is is kind of icky. Nobody likes maintenance burden. And I have learned a lot from our developers on why they're doing it this way. It's like, we need to be able to do bug fixes. For me as a product owner, I can also show you the template. What we ended up doing is establishing, what does ASAP mean? What does within the next 3 weeks mean, within your work cycle mean? What does PO will prioritize mean on a ticket? So for us, if something is 150% stopping work, somebody is not able to work because something is a bug or broken in our system, that is a high priority ASAP ticket that is going to be put on the work cycle board that very moment, and the developer team will have a look at it. The 3 weeks, it means, yeah, we've established a workaround, and I'm usually working with the stakeholders or the users at this point. We've established a workaround, or it's not a high priority. They can go away and do something else within the next 3 weeks or sometimes 6 weeks. It will be okay as long as we fix it. And then if it's something that's like, well, it's something that we really need to look at, our amazing team really needs to look at some point, either I or frankly Trey is the one that will then prioritize that other stuff. We always have, I would say, always have someone from operations on our daily stand-ups and cycle start and stops. That's also incredibly helpful, especially if you're starting up a work cycle and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, we need to plan out, we need X number of VMs. It's good that they also have an ear in these conversations so they can plan accordingly too. Does that answer your question? I feel like I'm babbling. I'm sorry if I'm
No, these are
meandering.
great. These are great answers. And Jessica said, yes, thank you. Maggie said she'd love to see the template you referenced, and I would too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. And I've got to give full credit where it's due. I was sitting in a Geo Blacklight community call, and it's as they were gearing up for their community sprint. And they happened to show the template that they use for the community sprint. And I pinged, his name is Sean Ellis. He's also on DLS. I'm like, hey, this is a really good template. And he said, yeah. So we started with that. And this is something, when you're a product owner, ask questions to your product team. If you see them like constantly changing around your ticket a little bit, feel empowered to say, hey, I noticed you've been adding information to my ticket. Is there something else I should be adding? Or are there things that you need that I'm not providing? And that was this particular ticket. So let me get into my GitHub account. We use GitHub, by the way, ZenHub board as well, which ZenHub board can be kind of glitchy sometimes, but it's still good. So I'm pulling up that template for you before I forget.
And while she's doing that, if there's any other questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. Otherwise, we'll wrap up after this. And maybe I can link to this when we send the recording or send something.
I should probably find one of mine. There we go. There we go. I'll just give a link in here. Oh, I see. Am I allowed to read a question?
Yes. Do you want me to read it for you? Yeah,
No,
she just
no.
put it in. Katie
Yeah.
asks, are you working with internal and external stakeholders where you are trying to balance operational needs as well as customer needs? How do you balance those priorities?
Good question. So my internal and external stakeholders, this is just so cool. It depends. We do have external stakeholders for a couple of projects with our South Asian Studies librarian, who's just this amazing collaborator, human being. She's really into not only democratizing access of collections, she's into democratizing the work. Like if we are unable to, like if there's a bazillion different languages that need to be, in this case for our ephemera, described, if it can be described in a country of origin, those are types of collaborations that she has actually looked into and set up, which of course means enhancements to our digital repository to make that possible. And that becomes conversations with my boss, sometimes with the Office of General Counsel. And the ways in which we prioritize that is, in this case, it was an approved digital project proposal, which is something that means, okay, it's a priority, we're doing this. We've altered our digital library strategy and our forms after 2020 to where it's kind of like we're writing a grant to ourselves to ensure that we also factor in developer time. So that's one of our learning things. It's like, oh yes, we were going to do this project and we want to build this in X, Y, and Z. Well, if it requires developers to enhance something in your repository, they should be talked to as well. Because where's that going to fit into their roadmap if everything is already kind of more or less loosely planned, I don't know, for the next 6 months, year, whatever the priorities may be for that year for that team. But yeah, so balancing operational needs, again, talking with my supervisor, sharing what I think is necessary, the percentages of work, making sure that the percentages of work that my boss knows about still work for me. And if they don't, I'll talk to him about it. Of course, there's always going to be times sudden priorities come up and you're like, oh, well, we're going to drop everything now and just make sure we can move forward. But you want to minimize that, right? So, the better and more efficiently you can work, the better you can take on those unexpected hiccups.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions. Are there any last minute? If not, thank you so much, Kim. That was a wonderful presentation. And then those questions, I really appreciate everyone asking those questions. Those were really, really excellent.
Thank you so much. And I'm looking, do you get a transcript of the questions? Because I'd love to share them with my teams as well, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, I'll find a way to export those. And then the recording, they'll be read out. So I'll find that transcript.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.